Welcome, everyone. I'm Dr. John White, the Chief Medical Officer at WebMD, and you're watching Your Health on Tech. How well did you sleep last night? Are you rested today? About 70 million Americans suffer from chronic sleep problems. Here are some examples of what I often hear from people.
So I have trouble falling asleep. I have trouble staying asleep.
I started having sleep issues several years ago.
I actually was diagnosed with insomnia when I was like in middle school.
One of the key things we've learned about sleep over the last few years is that it's not your brain simply turning off. Rather, during sleep, your brain and body are doing a lot of things. Your brain forms new pathways, your lymphatic system removes toxins, your body repairs cells and reduces stress hormone. I could go on and on. These are important functions, and when you have problems with sleep, it can result in a host of health problems, as well as decrease your quality of life. Let's be honest, no one feels good after a bad night's sleep. And think what's going on if it's several times a week or even every night. As a result, many of you are turning to various sleep tech devices. I bet many of you are wearing some type of sleep tracker right now. I am. I got a watch. Well, joining me to help think through how and when we should use these devices is Dr. Azizi Seixas. He is Associate Professor of Psychiatry and Behavioral Health. He's also the founding director of the Media and Innovation Laboratory and co-director of the Center for Translational Sleep and Circadian Rhythm at the University of Miami Miller School of Medicine. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm just very delighted to be here.
Well, let's talk sleep tech. I disclosed I'm wearing one. I have to ask you, are you wearing one?
I am, and at times I wear several.
and why is that?
Well, I think because they all aren't created equally. And so as you already mentioned earlier, that some of us wear sleep tech devices on our wrists. Some of us wear sleep tech devices on our fingers, such as rings. Some of us wear it around our heads. And in many ways, some of us use these tech devices that aren't necessarily called wearables, but they're called nearables, meaning that you're not actually putting them on your body, but they're close by and they're picking up important information that, one, measures your sleep, but also measures the environment in which you sleep. Because the key thing about sleep and good sleep is to optimize your environment so that you can get the best night's sleep.
When you're looking at tech, they're not all created equal as it applies to sleep. So how do you know which ones to choose? Because I've learned, I'm going to be honest, I've used different devices at the same time, partly for this show, and they didn't give me exactly the same score.
The reason why you see some of those discrepancies is because of the sensors on which most of these devices are built. That many of them uses AI and machine learning, and AI, I'm talking about artificial intelligence and machine learning. And so many of these are proprietary and therefore are in a black box, and it's hard for us to see transparently how did they derive whether or not we slept well or not, and how much we actually slept.
So are they reliable? How do we factor into that? Because I'll be honest, they give you a lot of data now that we typically didn't think about in sleep. REM sleep, non-REM sleep, normal sleep. As you point out, they all come up with their own terms about, restoration. So are the data reliable?
I think in many ways, there is some scrutiny around the reliability of these data. And so how I would frame that is that consumers come to sleep tech devices not because they're reliable. I think sometimes they do, but they believe it's valid. They know that it may not be, what we call statistically significant, but empirically, the impact is great. Why? Because if you are able to track your sleep, then in some ways it might be helpful, particularly for individuals who are in denial that they have a sleep problem. But you're right that in many ways that many of these devices are not reliable. Why? Because several studies have shown when you compare these sleep devices to your gold standard measurement of sleep, which is called polysomnography, that there are marked differences in the sleep duration that people get and the different sleep stages, meaning deep and light sleep, whether or not if you're non-REM, which is non-rapid eye movement, as well as rapid eye movement.
That's done in a lab, right? And I have to tell you, this is my pet peeve. I'm an internist. When, we used to try to diagnose sleep disorders, but it really makes sense that you send someone to a strange place, right? You attach a lot of electrodes, you draw labs, and then you say, sleep, and I'm gonna measure how good that is. So are these good enough in terms of trying to diagnose sleep issues?
I think what we're experiencing is that we're seeing the first wave of sleep technology. And so in many ways, you're not going to be perfect. You're not going to be perfect as compared to polysomnography.
What scores should we be looking at? Do I look at the time in deep sleep? Do I look at the time in REM? Sure, they all give us a composite score that might say fair or good, but I like to dig a little deeper. So what should people be looking at when they open up that app, perhaps, and see a whole bunch of data?
One of my biggest pet peeves and concerns with many of these sleep technologies is the fact that they don't provide enough education around or and about how people should interpret these data. And I truly believe that you should interpret your sleep data like a gestalt, like a big picture. So typically you want to look at your duration, meaning your total sleep time.
So I look at duration. What do I look at next?
So then the next thing after duration is that you want to look at the amount of time that you actually spend in deep sleep and light sleep. Now, here's why you have to take this with a grain of salt, because the areas in which I truly believe that the sleep technology devices have not been as accurate is being able to determine what sleep stages someone is in. So when you look at sleep stages, if you were to do it in a traditional sleep clinic, it's broken into two primary sleep stages. One is non-rapid eye movement, which is what we call non-REM. That consists of three primary stages. And then you have rapid eye movement. Now, typically what happens is that with the first few stages, it's typically called more light sleep. But as you move to stages 2 and 3, which are really characterized by lower what we call brain activity in stage 2 and stage 3, which in many ways has been linked to more restorative sleep. This is where wearing some form of wristwatch is really unable to capture brain activity that you will experience in stages 2 and 3. But when you look at the sleep stages, particularly in deep sleep, they oftentimes tell you a percentage. Now, one of the things that we're all overachievers, if you see that you've gotten 20% of deep sleep, you're like, whoa, it's not 100%, there's something wrong. Actually, that's not bad, that's actually good. With regards to technology, it depends on your sleep efficiency. Let me explain what do I mean by that. Sleep efficiency essentially means by the time you went to bed and by the time you woke up, how much of that time in between you're actually sleeping. And so if your sleep efficiency is high, then those outputs are reliable. But if your sleep efficiency is lower, then I would suggest that those parameters in terms of deep and light sleep are not as reliable.
And that's predicated upon the stages, which you're suggesting tech right now, in terms of wearables, isn't as good as it could be in the future. So we have to interpret that. What about looking at trends over time? That's what we've talked about with some other wearables.
I believe in this mantra that, you need to see sleep as an investment, right? So you start your day with sleep. So if you know you're going to have a stressful day or a stressful week, then you want to ensure that you load up on your energy. I consider sleep your energy in many ways, even though many people see food as such. Yes. And so I usually look at total sleep time. Then I look at some other parameters, as I had mentioned in terms of efficiency, how much time is spent in deep sleep and light sleep. But trends are so critical because you can determine whether or not if you are having some significant sleep problems, like insomnia. When you're looking at insomnia, where the numbers of insomnia, not just in the United States, but globally are increasing, we don't have good measurements for that.
I want to ask you about this point that I've been hearing lately in the news that people will say, you know what, if their tracker tells them they had a bad night of sleep and rated it as poor to fair, even though to your point that they're saying they might feel okay, it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy that they think their day is going to be a bad day and it's going to be hard. Have you heard that as well?
And this is where, I truly believe that people need to take these data with a grain of salt.
Bottom line, you'd still recommend people use the current devices?
I think so. I really do.
But Dr. Seixas, what I think is exciting is just as we're measuring heart rate, we're measuring blood pressure, we know the importance of these variables, now we're finally starting to pay more attention to the importance of sleep. And by measuring it, even if it's still a little imperfect, we're collecting important data trends and emphasizing the role that sleep plays. As I started at the beginning, it's not just turning our brains off for several hours.
I think you're absolutely correct. And to me, that's the takeaway message, which is why I position this as the first generation. We're just happy that people are having a conversation about sleep. And where we want to be able to go is not just situating sleep as this health condition that can make you sick, but now we're seeing athletes, we're seeing executives, we're seeing everyone, we're seeing educators see the importance of sleep that can lead to positive health outcomes.
Well, thank you for this conversation on sleep and helping us to recognize it's important. Dr. Seixas, thanks for your time today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.